Hi, everyone. Major update from the Finance Committee yesterday.
The government has heard opposition concerns regarding Clause 208 as currently drafted, and we are willing to support the guardrails suggested by these CPC amendments.
We have breaking news. Back in December, we warned Canadians of a clause that Mark Carney hid within his budget that would grant sweeping immunity powers to his federal ministers, and just how much that power could be abused. Since then, Canadians across the country have been writing letters, making phone calls, voicing their disgust, while Conservatives have been fighting tooth and nail at committee to rein it all in. In the end, the Conservatives have secured 5 key amendments that imposed real structural guardrails and significantly gutted the intended powers, keeping power in the hands of the people where it belongs. Let's take a look.
I am pleased to put forward amendments to Part 5, Division 5, Part 2 of this bill. As you all know, as currently written, this provision grants individual cabinet ministers the extraordinary power to exempt handpicked individuals or entities from any federal law with the exception of the criminal code. This is an immense concentration of power, and what is clear is that this concern has been widespread and consistent, and I judge that by the number of petitions, emails, and letters, calls, and messages that I have received. The amendments that I am moving today seek to strike a balance between innovation, accountability, and democratic safeguards. It preserves the ability to create regulatory sandboxes that will support innovation in the clean tech sector and fintech sector. Specifically, the amendments introduce 7 key protections. First, a mandatory 30-day consultation prior to making the exemption. Second, equal rules that apply to all participants within the sector, not only the handpicked companies. Third, dual approval by both a cabinet minister and the president of the Treasury Board. Fourth, mandatory public consultation of voters within 30 days. Fifth, a full report to Parliament within 90 days explaining the rationale and assessing whether permanent legislative changes are warranted. Sixth, a requirement that ministers appear before committee when requested to explain the sandbox. And seventh, clear limits on what can never be exempted, including foundational statutes such as the Conflict of Interest Act, Access to Information Act, the Auditor General Act, and other core accountability, safety, and national interest laws. While I would have preferred that this provision be removed from the Budget Implementation Act entirely, given the importance of this provision, I believe that these amendments present a balanced and responsible path forward. It meets the urgency of this moment while preserving the accountability, transparency, and democratic standards Canadians expect. And I trust that my colleagues here today can see that these amendments are being presented in good faith, that they are thoughtful, they're substantive changes that strengthen this bill. And they offer us an opportunity to show Canadians, the Canadians that we serve, that we can work together responsibly and constructively in the best interests of our country. Thank you.
So hats off to Sandra Cabina and the rest of the finance team. Garnet Jennis has been kind of the bodyguard for procedure from that perspective, and he has been doing an amazing job supporting all of the core team in the Finance Committee. Sandra has been fighting against this for weeks and weeks and weeks, and we've covered some of that testimony. Some of it happened while we were away on vacation. She went after Minister Champagne. She went after Mark Miller. She went after Steve McKinnon. And none of them could explain why this was even needed. So this was an interesting scenario, because you have Mark Carney and all of the Liberals trying to cry obstruction, and probably even hoping that the Conservatives will vote against this bill to try and trigger an election. Again, it's another poison pill. But the Conservatives have been saying, we're not going to take that bait. We're going to do what you say that we don't, which is we're going to try and collaborate, and we're going to see who the ones are actually obstructing legislation in this Parliament. So the Conservatives have been moving forward in good faith. Now, they haven't said yet that they're going to support the entire Bill C-15, but I expect that they will. Otherwise, why would they spend all this time actually working on all of these amendments? So they're trying to say, listen, we're trying to put in responsible legislation. The Liberals are the ones that are trying to grab as much power as possible and concentrate that into the cabinet so it doesn't even have to go to Parliament. So a couple of things that she said were very, very important. So number one, there has to be a report that is brought to Parliament after 90 days of any decision being made. And there's a 30-day consultation period. And most importantly, there's exemptions. And what I mean by that is you cannot exempt companies from the Conflict of Interest Act, from the Information or Access to Information Act, from the Auditor General Act. Because this is the crazy thing, folks. Before the Conservatives put in these amendments, if this had just passed as is, any minister could tap Brookfield, could tap any corporation or any person in Canada and say, you are now exempt from being audited by the Auditor General. You are now exempt from having to comply with the Conflict of Interest Act, so you can be in whatever conflict of interest that you want. You are exempt from the Access to Information Act. So anyone who actually requests information from you, you don't have to provide it because now it's law. These are some of the core acts in Canada that allow us to hold government and corporations accountable. If the Conservatives hadn't put in these amendments, the Liberals would have been able to have anybody circumvent these laws for up to 3 years, and then, they could extend them in perpetuity, potentially. So this is a prime example of the Conservatives doing the work in committee and demonstrating to Canadians of all stripes that, listen, we don't obstruct. What we do is we try to make legislation better, and we call out BS when we see it. That's what we do. Now, here is the moments in committee where these amendments are actually carried, and the government actually relents and says, grudgingly, fine, we will accept the amendments.
The purpose of the clauses was to encourage innovation. The government has heard opposition concerns regarding Clause 208 as currently drafted, and we are willing to support the guardrails suggested by these CPC amendments.
Shall CPC 1 carry? Okay, carried. Okay, shall CPC 2 carry?
Yes.
Okay, CPC 2 carried. Shall CPC 2 carry? 3, sorry. Yeah, okay, CPC 3 carried. Shall CPC 4 carry?
Yep.
Okay, CPC 4 carried. Shall CPC 5 carry?
Yep.
Okay.
Last but not least, here is Garnet Jennis and Sandra Cabina talking about this and the victory that the Conservatives scored in committee yesterday.
Hi, everyone. Major update from the Finance Committee yesterday. I'm joined by my colleague, Sandra Cabina, who was responsible for a successful amendment. Sometimes the system actually works, as someone pointed out on Twitter. Sandra, can you give us a quick update on the work you've been doing and the amendment that you got passed yesterday at the Finance Committee?
Yeah, so it was an amendment to a clause, a very problematic clause that we called the King or Henry VIII clause, which essentially would have given cabinet ministers sweeping powers to exempt anyone or any company or individual from any federal law except for the criminal code. So this is an immense concentration of power with the excuse of promoting innovation. So, but yesterday we put forward some amendments that were constructive, that they were thorough, and it provided enough safeguards and limits on these powers while still allowing for innovation in the fintech and the clean tech sector.
Mm-hmm. Now, you had some pretty iconic exchanges with ministers at the Finance Committee in the lead up to it. A few exchanges with the Finance Minister, as well as one with Mark Miller. Maybe if you can share a bit about kind of how you were setting the table on this, helping people become aware of this problem, and poking holes in the arguments that ministers were making.
Well, upon review of the Budget Implementation Act, which is over 600 pages, there's this tiny clause which essentially gives them this immense power, the powers of a king, which is what I referenced to the ministers. And in my questioning, I wanted to understand why there was a need for this clause. And I never got a justifiable answer. And in fact, it was confirmed several times that they do not, in fact, need it to do their job. It would just be nice to have. Well, that was pretty alarming. And so in my exchanges, I think that was very evident. But I was pleased that we were able to provide some amendments that they considered. We advocated for them, and they were adopted ultimately yesterday.
All right. Well, Sandra, congratulations on your great detailed work identifying this problem, making the case for it, and passing this amendment. This is really what is supposed to happen in Parliament, right? That we're able to actually make the case for things, put forward proposals, and get them adopted. And you've been here less than a year, and you're already making a mark. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And this is how it's done, folks. This is how our democracy is supposed to work. This is how Parliament is supposed to work. If only the Liberals would actually play ball now and then. But there are a lot of really strong members of Parliament that are on the Conservative team right now. Sandra Cabina fast demonstrating that she is one of them in the financial sector. And this is what the opposition is supposed to do. They're supposed to oppose. They're supposed to hold government to account. Opposing is not obstruction. Obstruction is not opposing. But you're supposed to hold the government's feet to the fire whenever they're straying off the road, and that road is supposed to be serving Canadians. But as we keep seeing, the Liberals keep trying to scurry off that road and only act in their self-interest or the interest of their buddies that are in charge of these multinational corporations. This is why we are so fortunate that the Conservatives have such a strong team in there to make sure that that never, ever happens.